They appeared to be the model upwardly mobile family.
They were living the American dream.
He was a talented craftsman.
He can build you a house from the ground up.
She was a successful businesswoman.
She was the hustler, the go-getter. She was the moneymaker.
But her success didn't come without cost.
They had their arguments.
I heard him saying, "You have 5 kids at home that want you to come home."
And on the evening of January 2nd, 2006, their conflict came to a violent end.
Tony was pronounced dead at the hospital.
The stress, the overload, the money, it all just really pushed her too far.
January 2nd, 2006, 38-year-old Karen Grauber had spent the last several nights sleeping at the new daycare center that she was in the process of opening.
She said she was staying at the daycare because she was working late to get extra work done.
But was it the only reason? It was no secret that Karen and her husband Tony had been having issues.
They had their arguments. My parents were always like that. They're fighting for 2 minutes, in love for 3 days, fight for a day. Like, it's just how it was.
And the arguments were often about the amount of time the mother of 5 was spending away from home.
My dad was upset because, I mean, she got kids at home.
My mother was caring for their children during the day. She would go to their home and make sure that the children had dinner, did their homework.
So that New Year's, Tony Grauber decided he should be the one who moved out.
He had packed his stuff to leave because he tells his daughter that Mom says she won't come back as long as I'm here, so I'm leaving for a while.
Once he was packed, Tony stopped by the daycare to talk to Karen on the evening of January 2nd.
He probably figured, let me go in and bring her home.
At first, things seemed to go according to plan. In fact, they apparently went better than Tony had intended. A little after 11 o'clock, Karen spoke to her daughter on the phone.
I tried calling my dad's cell phone a few times, but he didn't answer, so I called my mom. And she said, yeah, he's here with me. We're talking, figuring some stuff out, and we'll be home.
Had her parents made a breakthrough?
I said, both of yous? And she's like, yeah, we'll both be home.
That's what her mom said, but the reconciliation wouldn't happen. Less than an hour after she spoke to her daughter, Karen Grauber picked up the phone and dialed another number.
Philadelphia Police Operator 428.
Can you send an officer to 7425 Sunset Avenue because I just shot my husband.
Tony Grauber was Karen's second husband. They had met 17 years earlier, near the end of her first marriage.
She got married at a very early age, and I understand that it was somewhat rocky.
The marriage had given Karen a daughter, however.
They weren't together very long after I was born.
And when Tony met Karen in 1989, he was immediately attracted to the free-spirited 22-year-old.
Mom was very, free, fun, loud, eccentric.
She was just crazy and wild.
Although she was technically still married, Karen and Tony were soon a couple.
I liked her. I mean, she was nice, she was funny. I liked her because she made my brother very happy.
Karen soon divorced her first husband, and in 1994, not long after the birth of Tony and Karen's first child, the couple married.
They didn't have a big wedding. Karen and Tony were married at the Justice of the Peace.
After the wedding, Tony adopted Karen's daughter from her previous marriage, and with a new family to feed, took on a second job.
He began to rehab homes and fix homes up. He was doing that part-time on the side while he was working for a company that repairs nightlights throughout the city.
He can build you a house from the ground up. I mean, he was awesome with his hands.
And Karen had her hands full too. By 2000, she and Tony had had 3 more children.
She mainly stayed home to do what she had to do with getting us off to school and stuff.
Karen was a hard worker, a good mother.
To house their growing family, in 2002, Tony and Karen bought a home in Northeast Philly's Holmesburg neighborhood.
The property that they had bought had been sort of a ramshackle property before they bought it.
A few years of sweat equity later, Tony had transformed the ramshackle old house into the envy of the neighborhood.
Their home had become like a gathering place for children in the neighborhood. Obviously, when you have 5 kids and a swimming pool and a big yard and swing set, and it's going to be a magnet for their children's friends.
More than a magnet, actually. Karen was running an unofficial after-school program for half the neighborhood.
We had some kids that would come, my mom would babysit them, so it was more on top of what was already going on. I mean, there was 5 of us.
She was really nice. She was very good with my girls.
Karen's side business was doing so well that in 2002, she and a friend decided to make it official.
My mom's friend came to her the one day and told her that she wanted to open up a daycare. She found the perfect spot for it.
By 2003, the partner had dropped out, leaving Karen and Tony the owners of Tic Tots Nursery.
She put her heart and soul, like my brother did, to build, the businesses.
They put all that we had into it.
Karen and Tony's investment quickly paid off.
The parents, they really liked her. And I seen that firsthand at the daycare. They just loved her.
Having been a mother with a lot of kids, bringing all that experience to it, she had a very good reputation.
Soon, Karen added a second location.
She was doing very well, and well enough certainly to expand.
The expansion resulted in a significant change in Karen's role, however.
She was pretty much hands-on in the beginning. Once the money started flowing in, it was pretty much up to the staff to keep the place running. She was pretty much only around when it was time to collect the money.
Karen spent more time taking care of the books than taking care of kids. But the money the daycares brought in did provide a big boost to the family income.
She was the go-getter. She was the moneymaker, the hustler of the family. He worked, he carried his own weight, but she was really put them in a lifestyle above and beyond.
On the surface, it seemed like they were living, an American dream.
But only on the surface. Managing 2 successful businesses was starting to take its toll on Karen.
The daycares just pretty much consumed Karen.
The daycare, the stress, the overload, the money, it all just really pushed her too far.
To cope with the stress, Karen turned to prescription drugs.
I knew that she used, like Valium or Xanax and stuff like that.
And whether it was the drugs, the stress, or something else, there was no denying that by the summer of 2005, Karen was different.
She just changed. She wasn't the same person she used to be.
I'd see her coming in early in the morning, going out late at night.
She just wasn't there, always in and out.
Karen's behavior soon led to friction with Tony.
Tony was trying to keep his family together.
My dad tried to drill in her head that you have 5 kids. You're running a daycare. What are you doing?
And as summer turned to fall, Karen and Tony's arguments became angrier and more frequent.
We would listen at the top of the stairs and we knew what was going on. A lot of their fights were verbal.
But were all the fights just verbal?
But Tony did love his wife. He did. I mean, we all, in the heat of the moment, do things, but I know he did love Karen.
Whether their fights got physical or not, Karen did call the police at least once.
She told him to leave, and he wouldn't leave because, it's his house. Why should he leave?
No charges were filed.
Basically, Karen and Anthony had a long discussion out in the street in front of the home with the police officer.
But the incident did result in a temporary restraining order against Tony.
She had sought a protection from abuse order at one point.
Mostly, she simply avoided Tony. With her marriage in turmoil, Karen had recently reconnected with an old friend named Billy Weiss.
Billy was like a mutual friend. I believe he was Karen's friend before, he actually met Tony.
He was a really nice guy, but he got in trouble sometimes.
And by 2005, Karen's old friend had fallen on hard times. Separated from his wife, his health failing and partially dependent on a wheelchair, he seemed to appreciate Karen's company.
That's where she would go and get away from my uncle and do whatever she wanted, I guess.
In October of 2005, frustrated by the constant conflict with Tony, Karen took things a step further. Leaving the kids with Tony, she rented her own apartment and moved out.
She just looked at it as, Mommy has a new place, you come visit me here.
Karen's kids would frequently visit their mother at the apartment, but they knew something was wrong.
It was confusing at first, and I asked her, and she just said that she needed some time away.
But it soon became obvious that Tony objected to the new arrangement. It was almost Halloween. Karen was planning to go to a party that night and had spent the afternoon shopping for costumes with her niece, Christina.
She said, I need to get ready, get dressed before your uncle comes here. And I said, oh, why? And she's like, oh, because he'll stop me from going out.
As Karen predicted, Tony soon showed up. Christina stepped out of the room as the couple exchanged heated words.
I heard him saying, you have 5 kids at home, they want you to come home, you have to go home. She's like, I'm not going anywhere.
The argument only ended when Tony's father arrived and diffused the situation.
My grandpa came and got my Uncle Tony. He had to leave his truck there. He was too upset to drive. My grandpa just took him home.
After the incident, Tony and Karen spent the next 2 months locked in a stalemate. She kept the apartment, but he did pitch in and help Karen open a 3rd daycare center on Franklin Avenue.
It was formerly a bank, but the first floor was being renovated for a daycare center.
Tony went over there, did all the construction, did all the walls, the electrical work.
By the end of the year, the work was almost done. And in the final rush to finish, Karen moved in temporarily.
She was staying at her daycare, sleeping on the couch.
But she wouldn't stay there long. After New Year's, Tony made a decision.
He wanted my mom to come home. He figured she needed to be there, she hadn't been there, and the kids needed their mom. And she wouldn't come home. She told him she wasn't gonna come home as long as he was there.
And on the evening of January 2nd, Tony packed his bags.
He told us all that he was gonna go away for a little while, so that my mom would come home.
That may have been Tony's plan. But when he walked into the daycare later that night, he would end up going away for a lot longer. Coming up.
The police officer had told me that my brother was deceased.
He wasn't sure if he took his life or what happened.
January 3rd, 2006. Perhaps an hour after Karen Grauber dialed 911, the news that her husband Tony had been shot started to spread through the extended Grauber family.
My father called and woke me out of my sleep, and he was crying on the phone. He had told me that my brother had been shot.
And that was only the beginning of the bad news.
As he sobbed on, I couldn't quite understand him, so I asked him to put somebody on the phone that I could understand, and they put the police officer on the phone, and the police officer had told me that my brother was deceased.
The officer didn't give further details, so as Paul Grauber drove to Philadelphia's Frankfurt Hospital, all he knew was that his brother Tony was dead.
I was thinking the whole time that I drove to the hospital, maybe he was carjacked or something.
By then, Tony and Karen's neighbors also knew the horrible news. Although instead of a phone call, the first indication of trouble came when police cars descended upon Karen and Tony's home.
The lights were flashing, and I said to my wife, I woke her up, I said, something's wrong over there.
My husband finally got a hold of Tony's dad on the phone, and I remember him saying, that he wasn't sure if he took his life or what happened, but he didn't make it.
A suicide or a carjacking would have been shocking enough, but the true reason for Tony's death was even more devastating. A little after midnight, Philadelphia police had been summoned to Karen Grauber's daycare center.
Philadelphia police, operator 428.
Can you send an officer to 7425 Frankfurt Avenue, because I just shot my husband.
7425
Frankfurt Avenue.
Where's your husband at now, ma'am?
He's on the floor. He's been shot.
Inside, police had found Tony Grauber lying in the daycare's office.
He's face down on the floor.
Tony had still clung to life as the EMTs loaded him into the ambulance.
They say that he was still alive when he was on the way to the hospital, even as they worked on him.
Their efforts had been in vain.
He was pronounced dead of a single gunshot wound to the chest.
While the ambulance was en route, Officers at the scene had placed Karen in the back of a police van.
Somebody's dead, and somebody's alive, and somebody's got a gun. So obviously she's the one that's arrested.
Actually, police had found 2 guns inside. One on a chair near the front door was Karen's.
The business and what was going on with it, she said she needed for protection.
It was due to the money that, you know, Karen said the money that they handled.
The second gun was on the sofa in the office.
Now, we don't know whether he had somehow put it there or whether she put it there. We just don't know.
While Karen was transported to a nearby police precinct, word that she had killed Tony finally reached his family at the hospital.
I never would have really thought that she was capable of pulling the trigger.
The news had barely sunk in before Tony's mother had a horrible realization.
She said, "No one is at the house for the children, and I need to get there."
She arrived moments before Karen and Tony's 5 children came downstairs.
My brother heard the cops banging downstairs, and he came upstairs and woke me up. But by that time, my grandma was already there.
And it was their grandmother, not the police, who gave Karen and Tony's kids the awful news.
My grandma told me, your mom shot your dad, and he's dead. And I mean, nothing really processed at all. It was just a blank. I had no feeling. I lost all feeling, I guess.
The initial shock eventually wore off, but one question remained.
You wonder why, and every day you're gonna wonder.
Karen's daughter had spoken to both her mother and Tony barely an hour before the shooting.
I just talked to them, both of them. It was unreal. It was something that you couldn't really grasp.
And according to what Karen had said on the phone, she and Tony had been trying to smooth things out.
She told me that her and my dad were talking at the daycare, and they both worked it out, and that they'd be home in a few hours.
What had happened in the time that separated the phone call and the shooting? For the moment, Tony's family had few answers.
The police were still interviewing her to see exactly what went on, what was going on, or what she had said was her side of the story.
It wasn't until early on the afternoon of January 3rd that Karen spoke at length to the investigators.
She said she wanted her attorney, so it took us a while to get him actually physically there.
While police tracked down her attorney, Karen waited in the interrogation room. There was little in her demeanor to indicate she had just killed a man.
She was calm. She wasn't overly excited. She was not disheveled. She had no bruising or any injuries visible. And other than that, she just sat there waiting for a lawyer.
And once her lawyer arrived, Karen was more than ready to cooperate.
Her lawyer went in and spoke to her for a few minutes. Then he came out. Then he said she was going to give a statement, and she was willing to talk to us.
And why, after killing her husband, would Karen be willing to talk? It all became clear once the police started taking down her statement.
She basically says in a statement that they had a stormy relationship.
Or to put it more precisely, Karen claimed her marriage had been an abusive one.
It was kind of general, sort of, that he had assaulted me and it had been like 15 years of it.
She said that she was a battered wife.
But that night, after years of alleged suffering, Karen said she had finally put a stop to Tony's abuse. Karen told police she was working late at the daycare that night when Tony showed up unannounced.
There was no problem. They had conversation, general conversation.
The talk went well for a while. But sometime after Karen spoke with her daughter, things apparently took an acrimonious turn.
Just like out of the clear blue, she says, he just starts arguing with me. Not for any particular reason, except for her to say that he's always been like that.
According to Karen, their fight quickly turned physical.
She stated at that point he became abusive. He grabbed her by the neck, started throwing her around the room.
She says that, he tried to choke me. And then she describes a fairly violent struggle.
But Karen also claimed that things calmed down a bit after Tony threw her on the couch.
She says, well, he's choking me and he threw me down on the couch, but then I said, could I get a cigarette? And he allows her to get up.
Karen said she'd gone over to the desk and grabbed something from her purse, but it wasn't a cigarette.
The way she explained it, she had tricked Tony into believing that she was going to get a cigarette out of her pocketbook and pulled her gun out.
But according to Karen, the gun had done little to stop Tony. She said he had stepped towards her, reaching behind his back as he did.
She thought he was going for the gun.
She didn't know if he had a holster or not, but she said he made the statement, "You're not the only one that likes to play with guns."
As Karen told the detectives, her husband had reached for his gun and she had reflexively pulled the trigger.
What she basically told him is that she used self-defense to shoot Anthony.
And as soon as Tony dropped to the floor, Karen said she had reached for the phone.
She shoots him, and then she calls 911.
She informed the operator that I just shot my husband and, send the police.
Finally, after over an hour of questioning, Karen's formal statement was finished.
The way we do it in the Philadelphia Police Department is we'll type the question, ask the question, and type her answer as she gives it. It's then reviewed by her and then signed by her.
Karen had signed off on her account of the shooting, but would the authorities? The ultimate decision was up to the DA.
They are the ones that make the determination of whether to charge her or not and what to charge her with.
Coming up, will the investigation confirm that Karen was abused or that she was the abuser?
Karen was a drug addict, a liar, a thief. That sums up Karen.
The afternoon of January 3rd, 2006 found Karen Grauber waiting in a police interrogation room. It was a little over 12 hours since she had shot and killed her husband, Tony, and Philadelphia police were trying to sort out exactly what had led to the shooting.
There were two people there that actually witnessed what happened, and one of them's dead.
According to what Karen had just told police, she had acted in self-defense.
Her self-defense claim was basically built around a long history of abuse and her honest belief that this was going to happen again.
But was her claim enough to convince the authorities? While Karen waited at the police station, the DA had a decision to make: charge her or let her go.
She gave her statement, and that statement was reviewed by the district attorney's office.
At first glance, Karen's statement appeared to be fairly forthcoming.
She didn't seem to be hiding anything. I mean, she admits she shot him. She admits she didn't see a gun.
But there were also several things in Karen's statement that didn't appear credible to the authorities. For one thing, after supposedly throwing her onto the couch and choking her, Tony had let Karen up in order to get a cigarette.
The fact that he would fight with her like that and then let her go to her pocketbook knowing she carries a gun, that's a little suspect.
And even if Tony hadn't known about the gun, the story still sounded odd to the investigators.
She showed no physical signs of abuse. She was not disheveled. She had no bruising or any injuries visible.
There was no real indication that there was this great struggle going on, or, that Mr. Grauber had, attempted to choke his wife.
And then there was Karen's account of the actual shooting.
She said he started reaching for his gun and she fired one shot.
That's what Karen had said, at least. But the location of Tony's body and Tony's gun suggested otherwise.
He's found face down on the floor and the gun is on the sofa. It's a little difficult to put the gun there when you're laying on the floor.
Finally, after reviewing the facts of the case, the DA's office reached a decision. Around 8:30 p.m., the detective stepped into the interrogation room where Karen was waiting with her attorney and placed her under arrest.
She was upset at the fact that she was getting arrested. I think she believed that her statement would vindicate her and she would walk away.
Once she was booked on murder charges that afternoon, it would be up to the courts to decide.
Karen was charged with a general murder charge, which is a common practice in Philadelphia. The district attorney's office doesn't select a first-degree or a third-degree murder or even a second-degree murder from the outset. They let a court decide where they want it to go.
Tony's family had already reached their decision, however.
We wanted her to get first-degree murder because we believed that my brother was murdered
And Karen's allegations of abuse at Tony's hands?
The family took a very strong stance because they felt that Karen was dragging their loved one's name through the mud. She was throwing accusations around to defend herself.
The accusations made by Karen against my brother, I had every reason to shoot and kill him. He was abusing me. It was not true.
In all the years growing up, I've never seen my dad physically abuse my mom.
With Karen in custody, held without bail for shooting her husband, police followed up on her claims of spousal abuse. A quick canvass of the neighborhood revealed little.
That prior summer in '05, neighbors recalled a couple of police cars showing up late at night, one night at the home.
A search of police records did verify the neighbors' claims.
We pulled radio calls. There were disturbances, and some of them were domestic in nature.
Those disturbances had once been enough to convince a judge to issue a temporary restraining order against Tony. But were the handful of incidents enough to lend credence to Karen's claim that she was a battered wife? Or was there more to the story? In a series of interviews, Tony's family claimed that Karen was living a secret life.
She made it seem like we had all this money, we had this big, extravagant life, and it wasn't like that.
But according to the family, the real problem was that Karen was spending money faster than it was coming in. They claimed that there was an abuser in the Grauber house, but it wasn't Tony. It was Karen.
Karen was a drug addict, a liar, a thief.
In their interviews, the family claimed the trouble had started not long after Karen opened her first daycare.
It was because of a lot of stress, because all the stuff she had to worry about, like the daycares and stuff at home and her relationship with my uncle.
And as the stress mounted, the family alleged that Karen had sought relief by abusing prescription drugs.
The pressure started to build on, and it all started to weigh her down. She turned to it, and she had the money to do it. She had the connections.
According to the family, Karen's main connection was her old friend, Billy Weiss.
He was providing Karen with these prescription medications.
And once Karen started taking the drugs, the family said that she had been caught in a downward spiral that soon led to addiction.
She had this picture-perfect life that everybody was supposed to see, and I think it was starting to get to her, that it wasn't as perfect and she didn't know how to fix it.
Karen's daughter even claimed that her mother had overdosed during a beach trip in the summer of 2005.
We all went to the store to get boogie boards and stuff to go on the beach with, and when we came back, my mom was laying out on the beach out back of the house, just laying there.
She was so messed up, she couldn't walk. She couldn't stand or nothing.
Was the overdose accidental or intentional?
She told me to leave her there, that she wanted to die and she didn't want to be with us anymore.
Despite Karen's stinging words, Tony had loaded her into the car and taken her home.
My dad was just so infuriated with her and confused.
Tony loved Karen. He idolized Karen. There's nothing he wouldn't do for Karen. And I think that was so hard, why it was so hard for him to walk away from Karen.
Instead, Tony had tried to cope too.
We found out that it was Tony who was taking care of the household. He was fixing dinners. He was taking care of the children.
Meanwhile, according to the family, Karen had found a new addiction.
She had a gambling problem. She used to get cards in the mail from the different casinos.
She spent many of hours, the children tell us, from nighttime until they woke up for school the next day on the computer gambling with the online casinos.
And thanks to the drugs and gambling, the family claimed Karen's finances were a shambles.
She was getting backed up with the bills, and she was getting backed up with paying her staff.
In addition to money troubles, Karen had also had recent trouble with the police. In December of 2005, less than a month before Tony's shooting, Karen and her friend Billy had been arrested for shoplifting.
They were there shopping and pocketed a few things.
We're in line, ready to leave, and the guards blocked us from leaving. They asked Karen to take the stuff out of her pocket.
Karen had refused, angrily.
She was screaming and yelling, saying she didn't do anything wrong.
She flipped out on him and began to smack the security guards in the face, scratched them.
And she ended up in the back of a squad car.
She was charged with robbery at the time.
Nothing had come of that arrest, however.
I had the case dismissed because they certainly didn't prove that she had any intention whatsoever of leaving the premises with the item.
Coming up, can the prosecutors make the murder charges stick?
I did what I had to do. I got up there because my family needed me to.
Or will a stunning new revelation leave the prosecution reeling?
She was going to be raped again, yet again.
When Karen Grauber walked into a Philadelphia courtroom on March 2, 2007, it was hard for the casual observer to believe that the successful businesswoman was about to stand trial for shooting her husband.
What made this crime so shocking was that the Grauber family appeared to have everything. It just didn't seem like the kind of thing that would happen.
And if a mother of 5 accused of murder wasn't enough, the investigation had uncovered allegations that Karen led a double life. In fact, there were dual and dueling accounts of 2 different secret lives. According to Tony's family, Karen was an emotionally unstable drug addict.
As the drugs progressed, the gambling progressed, she progressed. She changed to a whole different person.
Karen, meanwhile, maintained that she shot Tony in self-defense, citing years of abuse she had secretly suffered at her husband's hands.
She had a history of abuse, and I was going to be able to present a case of severe, long-term abuse at the hands of the deceased.
But in her opening statement, Assistant DA Yvonne Ruiz argued that there was little evidence to substantiate Karen's accusations.
Medical records of prior assaults, admissions into the hospital. There was nothing to corroborate that. So it was just basically her word that this had happened.
The defense's response? In his open, Karen's attorney reiterated her original claims of abuse.
In the opening statement, Mr. Peruto talks about a series of physical altercation that had occurred between the defendant and her husband, Anthony.
And then, to everyone's surprise, he upped the ante, adding a significant new detail to Karen's story of an abusive marriage.
He also talks about sexual assaults, and he also talks about rape.
She was going to be raped again, yet again, by the deceased. She was tired of it. She had been abused for several years, and she finally pulled the trigger.
The accusation reverberated through the crowded courtroom like a shot.
I certainly don't believe that my brother ever raped Karen. I know that to be a lie.
The prosecution didn't believe it either. They started presenting their case with police testimony, attacking Karen's story that Tony tried to pull a gun.
When the police get there, his gun is laying on a sofa cushion. It's difficult for him to put it there.
Prosecutors also had a witness to testify that there had been no signs of trouble brewing between Karen and Tony that night. Karen's own daughter.
As late as about 11:30, she spoke to her mom. And her mom said, you know, that Anthony was there, that they were just talking.
In what would be one of the trial's most riveting moments, Karen's daughter took the stand and testified against her mother.
The whole time, her eyes were pinned on me. She was like wanting me to stare at her, wanted me to feel sorry for her, but I did what I had to do.
What she did was tell jurors about the phone conversation she'd had with Karen barely an hour before the shooting.
That's when she told me she was at the daycare with my dad talking, and that they'd both be home in a little bit and she'll see us in the morning.
There had been no indication of a fight. And while Karen's daughter did admit that her parents often argued, she said their fights were never physical.
If somebody was touched, it was because they were in each other's faces and they just, like, they needed backup, you know? It wasn't like punching or abusing.
So why would Karen kill Tony? His family certainly had a strong opinion.
She wanted to be free. She didn't want to have a husband. She didn't want to have kids.
She wanted to live life in the fast lane.
During the investigation, the family had provided police with detailed allegations about everything from pill popping to shoplifting. Had Karen's supposedly drug-fueled downward spiral led to Tony's death?
We just felt as though there was a direct correlation.
But whatever role it played in Tony's death, the DA couldn't delve into Karen's erratic behavior in the months before the shooting.
She could not use that in court because that would be considered just defamation of character.
You can only introduce convictions, and there are only certain kind of convictions that you would be able to introduce. It's very limited.
But did those limits hurt the prosecution's chances for a conviction? Not necessarily.
The Commonwealth does not have to prove motive, and in fact, the jurors are instructed on that.
The prosecutors may not have provided a motive for the shooting, but when the defense started presenting its case on March 6th, Karen's attorney was quick to offer one. And according to the defense, it was a motive that absolved Karen of any crime.
What her defense was is the battered women's syndrome, that there had been years of these physical assaults.
The progressive abuse got worse and worse and worse to the point where it was just a horrific situation for her to be in.
And to describe just how horrific her situation was, Karen took the stand in her own defense.
I absolutely positively have no choice but to put her on the stand so the jury can hear why she pulled this trigger.
In her testimony, Karen took jurors back to that fateful January night. She told them she was staying at the daycare because years of escalating abuse had left her at the end of her rope.
She's sleeping at this place of business so she would not have to confront him. Basically, she did everything she could to avoid him.
According to Karen, things had started out well enough when Tony walked into the daycare that night. They had even had a nice talk, the conversation she had alluded to when her daughter called. But Karen also testified that Tony's demeanor had changed shortly after she had hung up the phone.
The defense wanted to believe that there was a heated argument that had developed between Mr. and Mrs. Grauber.
Like a clock, he turns around and he's absolutely abusive again.
According to the defense, Mr. Grauber physically choked Mrs. Grauber.
Next, Karen claimed that Tony had forced her down onto the sofa, and she said she knew what was coming next.
She said that her husband told her it's going to be a long night, and the defense attorney, Mr. Prudo, asked her, what did that mean? And she said that it meant that her husband was going to rape her.
The rape scenario appeared to explain all the loose ends in Karen's original story. The gun on the sofa, Tony letting her up for a cigarette, and even the rage that ultimately led to the shooting.
She testified that he was assaulting her one more time. She just couldn't deal with it anymore.
There was only one problem, something the DA was quick to point out in her closing arguments.
She doesn't mention rape until she gets on the witness stand.
Karen certainly hadn't said anything about rape during the initial investigation. In fact, the word didn't even appear in her formal statement.
But she never mentioned rape at all. And the whole time we were with her, she never mentioned that.
Why hadn't Karen told police about the rape? The defense countered by stressing that Karen's statement was nothing of the sort.
She's answering questions of trained homicide investigators. So she's not volunteering things, she's answering questions.
And as the defense stressed in closing arguments, there was one very important question that the police failed to ask.
They never asked her, were you afraid of being raped? Had she been asked that question, it would have been clearly yes.
Coming up, will Karen's latest accusation lead to an acquittal?
The jury being out for so long, it was nerve-wracking.
The courtroom was hushed as the jurors filed in on the afternoon of March 8, 2007. After almost 48 hours of deliberations, they had finally reached a verdict in the trial of Karen Grauber. Accused of murder for the January 2006 shooting of her husband Tony, the Philadelphia mother of 5 faced the possibility of life in prison.
The jury being out for so long, it was a little nerve-wracking because we weren't sure what they were thinking or how they were going to come back.
It was going to be a very tough one to decide. The only other person that had any firsthand knowledge of the shooting was the defendant.
In emotion-packed testimony, Karen had recounted suffering years of abuse at Tony's hands. She had even accused him of rape, something Tony's family didn't believe for an instant.
She cried wolf, she cried spousal abuse, she cried anything that she could, lie after lie.
True or not, Karen's allegations had apparently played on the jurors' sympathies. When the verdict was read, they opted to find her guilty of voluntary manslaughter, a lesser-included charge.
Voluntary manslaughter basically allows the jury to say, well, we don't think the prosecution proved that she intended to murder her husband.
The guilty verdict was little consolation for Tony's family.
It was far below what we thought that she should have gotten, but at least it was something.
We didn't want her to be acquitted. We knew that, she was guilty and she deserved to be punished.
Theoretically, the manslaughter conviction meant Karen faced a maximum of 25 years. But at her sentencing on March 17th, the punishment the judge handed down was far less.
She ultimately received the mandatory minimum of 5 to 10 years.
Why the light sentence? Karen's attorney called it a vindication for his client.
He's a tough judge, and he gave her that minimum because I believe that he was moved by her testimony.
Karen's own daughter has been less than moved by her mother's statements, however.
Until she really is sorry, I don't think she should come home. And I don't think she'll ever truly be sorry. I don't think that she cares. And like in all the letters she writes me, she tells me she's coming home and she can't wait to come home and this, that, and the other, but not once did it ever say, I'm sorry.
Kelly and Jim Cannon lived a life many would envy.
They had nannies, housekeepers, the works.
Money wasn't a consideration.
But the money couldn't buy Kelly a happily ever after.
He just said, I'm at my wit's end with this.
The divorce was ugly.
Kelly, put the baby down, the police is coming.
But it was never finalized.
He was found in the closet.
And the investigation into Jim Cannon's death would unmask the chaotic truth behind Kelly's marriage.
It was clear that something serious was going on.
June 23, 2008. It was around 8 a.m. when nanny Carly Dewey arrived at the upscale West Nashville home of Jim and Kelly Cannon.
The housekeeper was already there, and we just kind of did our normal thing and started talking, waiting for everybody to wake up.
The housekeeper ordinarily would do work in the downstairs portion of the house until the family, Mr. Cannon and the children, came downstairs.
But Mrs. Cannon would not be coming downstairs that morning. She and Jim were separated pending final settlement of their divorce. In the meantime, Kelly was living in a condo not far from the family home.
What had once been an idyllic marriage was just simply in shreds.
But as Carly and the housekeeper eventually realized that Monday morning, Jim and the kids didn't seem to be in the house either.
The housekeeper
became concerned after she was there for a significant period of time and never heard anything from the family.
She went upstairs and then she came back down and she said, "No one's here."
Jim's car was in the driveway, however. So with growing concern, Carly and the housekeeper went upstairs for a closer look. All the beds were empty. And in the bedroom shared by Jim's young sons, something else was out of place.
The bedroom closet door was closed, and the dresser from the boys' room was pushed against that closet.
We moved the dresser. It actually ended up not being too heavy, so it was easiest for her to do. And she had a look that freaked me out so bad. I started just like, what is it? And she was just like, "It's Jim."
He was dead.
He had significant ligature injuries. Obviously, some sort of thin cord or belt had been wrapped around his neck.
It was just so crazy that we had just talked to him on Friday and he was gone.
But where were the children? And where, for that matter, was Kelly?
I just thought it was going to turn into a huge, massive killing spree, not just Jim.
Kelly Cannon had lived a life of privilege long before she married Jim.
Mrs. Cannon was the daughter of a physician. She went to a very prestigious all-girls high school here in Nashville.
After college, she worked a short stint at the office of the Davidson County Medical Examiner.
She was a lab tech. She actually assisted in autopsies.
Next, she spent several years pursuing a PR career.
She had worked in a former governor's office. She had worked for NASA.
By the mid-90s, however, Kelly had gone back to school, pursuing a pre-med degree.
Her father is a doctor. One of Kelly's brothers is a doctor. And I think that Kelly wanted to follow in the footsteps of her father.
In between studies, the pretty 20-something was a regular in West Nashville's social circuit.
We had a big group of friends we ran around with, young Nashvillians, so to speak, and she was just in that mix.
So was a young attorney named Jim Cannon.
He liked to socialize, had a lot of guy friends and a lot of girlfriends, not romantically involved girlfriends, but just a lot of girlfriends that he kind of ran around with.
We'd all go out after work, a couple of times a week and go to parties and social activities on the weekends. We did a lot of charity fundraisers together.
Jim and Kelly quickly became an item.
She was a pretty girl, unbelievably nice, obviously smart, fun-loving, and I could see why Jim was attracted to her.
I thought this was the greatest thing that happened to him. I thought, fantastic, they're going to have a family.
The couple married in 1996. Kelly dropped out of college and alongside Jim, soon carved out a life worthy of a West Nashville society couple.
By all appearances, the Cannons had it made.
In 1999, Jim used his considerable legal savvy to launch a successful new business.
It's medical reimbursement. They collect insurance money on large hospital claims.
It was a multi-million-dollar company. It was a very profitable company.
That same year, Kelly gave birth to a son. A second son followed a year later.
They loved their kids, they were typical parents, would do anything for their kids.
In 2005, the Cannons bought a beautiful home on Bowling Avenue between West End and Green Hills.
When you hear West End or Green Hills, all of that area, you immediately think money, lots of money.
That was certainly true in the Cannons' case.
His wife didn't have to work. His kids were able to go to any school that they wanted. Money wasn't a consideration.
Although, like any family, the Cannons did have their issues, albeit well-hidden ones.
You would never know anything was going on unless you spent any kind of reasonable amount of time with them.
The trouble had started after Kelly gave birth to the couple's two sons.
Both times she had postpartum depression, which was real bad.
When Kelly gave birth to a daughter in 2006, her mental and physical health deteriorated.
Kelly was just not well. She was very sick, so she was pretty much laid up for the most part. She'd get up and kind of go through things, but then she was pretty much right back in bed.
Luckily, Jim could afford the best treatment Nashville had to offer.
She got top-notch care. He made sure that she had every medical opportunity available to her.
She had been prescribed a medication. He wanted her to get better. He wanted her to get help.
Jim made sure Kelly had plenty of help at home, too.
They had nannies, housekeepers, the works. They had it all.
She also had another girl that kind of helped her out with the child care and some other housekeeping stuff, running errands, grocery shopping, things like that. So I guess you could say she had like a personal assistant.
But an unexpected side effect of Kelly's illness began to put a strain on the Cannons' marriage.
She said she injured her back. She was constantly saying she had these types of injuries or getting dental work she didn't need or plastic surgery or whatever, and the main goal was for those pain pills.
She had been prescribed a medication, a lot of prescription medication, mixing it with alcohol, which really caused her behavior to be bizarre at times.
By 2007, Jim had had enough.
They were fighting, just things getting out of control, arguing over what was going on, and he's like, "You've got to get help."
Kelly agreed to go into an inpatient rehab program. And with Kelly away, Jim had to pitch in even more at home.
He was the one that was getting kids up and dressed. They'd come down, I'd get breakfast going with them.
He was trying really hard to be there for his kids, still keeping his responsibilities at work.
When Kelly got out of rehab, the Cannons' life seemed to go back to normal, but not for long.
You know, she'd do well for a while, but the second she gets out, she could not handle it at home on her own.
And after 11 years of marriage, the Cannons' relationship seemed close to the breaking point.
I did notice that he had been sleeping in the office, and I just wrote that off as she was not well and needed a rest, and so he just didn't want to bother her.
Jim's friends knew better, however.
He indicated that things were rocky at home. He didn't elaborate, but it's clear that something serious was going on in his world, but he didn't talk about exactly what that was.
Jim was just at his wit's end, and he told me, he said, "Maggie," he said, "if it wasn't for those kids, I'd probably be divorced now."
Jim soon reached his limit, however.
He just couldn't do it anymore. And I think it escalated to the point in February of 08 where he just decided he needed to file for divorce against her.
And the divorce wasn't by any means amicable. When he filed at the end of February, Jim sought full custody of the kids.
I don't know if that comes from him being an attorney and knowing what he would need in order to get, I guess, the most beneficial outcome of the divorce.
Whatever his motivation, Jim's petition was successful.
Mr. Cannon was awarded temporary custody of all 3 children. He was also awarded possession of the house. Ms. Cannon was basically put out of the house.
Kelly checked into a hotel while her children struggled to adjust to the new living arrangement.
In the chaos of their family situation, the boys had started sleeping in their parents' room. And Mr. Cannon would go down the hall and sleep in the boys' room instead.
They missed her, and so that was their way of connecting with her, and he probably just needed a sound sleep, so he would choose a bed that was away from the boys.
But as Kelly would prove, she was not about to let a court order come between her and her kids. On May 21st, 2008, Metro Nashville 911 received a frantic call from Jim Cannon. In it, he claimed Kelly had just come into the house and was attempting to leave with the kids.
She's got my baby in her arms, and she is feeding on the car right now.
He called the police department, and he alleged that she assaulted him.
Kelly, don't put the baby down. The police is coming. You're going to get in bad trouble if you take that baby off.
She tried to snatch one of the other children and couldn't get him. I think Jim got hold of him, and it was just a bad scene at the house.
No. Are you there, 911?
Yes, sir. I'm still here.
No, they're not getting in the car. No. They're not getting in either car. No, quit.
Hello, sir.
She takes the young little girl, who at that time I think was only like maybe 12, 18 months old, and got in the car and took off.
When the police arrived moments later, Jim and his sons were standing in the yard, watching as Kelly drove away with her daughter.
Just as she's pulling out of her driveway, the police pull in right behind her.
The police didn't pursue for long, however.
Once the officer realizes a child in the car, they terminated the pursuit.
But that didn't mean Kelly got away. Police tracked down her SUV's onboard navigation device.
She was taken into custody later that day at a motel and was charged with evading arrest and domestic assault and reckless endangerment due to the fact she had a child in that car when she was trying to get away from the police.
Kelly made bail, but just as Jim had threatened on the 911 tape, she was in bad trouble. And worse was coming.
The court was ordering her to stay completely away from Jim and her children for their safety.
Coming up, police receive another 911 call.
He was found laying on the floor in the closet.
And this time, there was no sign of Kelly.
We just kept saying, we're like, you have to find Kelly. You need to find out where she is.
June 23rd, 2008. It had been little more than a month since Kelly Cannon had been arrested during a dispute at her estranged husband Jim's home.
She had basically assaulted her husband, pushed him down, and then stolen basically her little 18-month-old girl.
Kelly was out on bail, and the charges resulting from the incident were still pending. That morning, squad cars were back outside the home Kelly once shared with her husband, her late husband. Earlier that morning, the Cannons' nanny and housekeeper had called 911 and reported finding him dead.
He was found laying on the floor in the closet in the boys' bedroom. He did sleep in there, and let them sleep in the big bed.
And after a preliminary examination of Jim's body, detectives quickly determined they had a homicide on their hands.
He had abrasions, various abrasions on his face, and also quite a number of bruises on his face.
There was also lateral marks that were parallel to each other around his neck, which would be consistent with someone using a ligature.
But before they could dig further into the matter of Jim's death, police had a more pressing mystery to solve. Jim and Kelly's 7- and 8-year-old sons and 18-month-old daughter were also missing.
Police at that point were primarily, first and foremost, concerned with the well-being of the children, because the children weren't where they were supposed to be, which was at home.
But the nanny and the housekeeper thought they had a pretty good idea where the children might be.
We just kept saying, we're like, you have to find Kelly. You need to find out where she is because the kids are not here and she has the kids.
We had some patrol units go over to a condominium where she was staying at, and we found the children there.
The children were safe, but the fact that they were with Kelly raised an immediate question. How did they get there? From the crime scene, lead detective Brad Putnam sent another detective to the condo to question Kelly.
I had that detective take a brief statement from her as to when was the last time she talked to her husband.
In a taped statement, Kelly admitted taking the children, but denied any knowledge of Jim's death.
When was the last time you saw your husband?
On May 22nd.
And where was that at?
That's when all this started.
According to Kelly, she hadn't seen Jim since the evening he had called the cops on her, alleging she had assaulted him while taking the baby. Although in her statement, Kelly gave a very different account of the incident.
And he threatened me and he showed me with the baby and he said, this isn't working and I'm going to do everything I can to keep you from the children, etc., etc.
Kelly claimed that's why she had taken the baby and fled.
I was scared to death because, he's the attorney.
Kelly told police she hadn't seen Jim since, but she said she had spoken to him at around 10:30 the night before while she was out having dinner with a girlfriend.
She had gone out with a friend to Bricktops, and that's a restaurant over on West End, not far from where she lived, not far from where she used to live with her husband.
Kelly told the detective that Jim had called her cell phone while she was at the restaurant. What had followed was a disturbing conversation.
According to Kelly, Jim told her that he was frightful, that he had been threatened. And she proceeded to ask him, well, who's threatening you? And he wouldn't say.
Kelly said she had no idea who might have been threatening Jim. She told police she had gone home to her apartment shortly after the phone call. But she also said she had spent the next hour worrying about what Jim had just told her.
At some point, she decided, I need to go check on my children. And she proceeded to the home, which wasn't very far.
According to Kelly, she had arrived to find the house wide open and no sign of Jim.
She sees the front door open. She goes in. She doesn't see her husband.
She called out to Jim Cannon and didn't hear anything, and just gathered up the children and left for their safety and for hers, according to her.
Then, Kelly asked the detective some questions of her own.
What's going on? Where is he?
He's at home. I need to know what you saw when you were at the house.
I'm telling you what
Okay.
I saw.
Eventually, the detective told Kelly why he was there. Jim was dead.
That's why we're here, because you have the children. You just think you might be the last person maybe to talk to them, see them. Okay? I'm sorry.
He was still dead.
Yes, ma'am.
After hearing the news, Kelly insisted she told him everything she knew. But was Kelly's story of a mysterious phone call the truth? Contacted by police, the woman she had met for dinner confirmed at least some of Kelly's story.
There was a phone call, and her friend verified that, the friend that she was eating dinner with that night.
Back at the crime scene, Detective Putnam pieced together the details of Jim's death.
We feel he was caught by surprise that he was asleep and was probably, in all likelihood, strangled, there in the bed and dragged out of the bed.
Detectives were never able to actually locate a murder weapon, but they were able to locate there in the room a piece of a cell phone charger.
It was an AC adapter, the part that plugged into the wall.
The cord was missing. That had been broken off, and it was nowhere around to be found.
Could the missing cord be the murder weapon? Even if Jim's attacker had taken the cord, there were still plenty of clues left behind.
There was blood found in the hall outside of where Jim was killed.
A few feet away, police found another potentially significant piece of evidence.
Walking into the boy's bedroom, we noticed the fingertip of a latex glove laying on the floor.
The body of the glove was not found. We can only surmise, maybe it just broke off.
Could the fingertip fragment point police toward Jim's killer?
Hopefully there had been DNA in the glove.
The blood sample and the glove were immediately entered into evidence.
That takes several weeks to perform DNA analysis.
In the meantime, Detective Putnam drove over to the apartment to question Kelly, who was clearly a person of interest at that point.
There was a dead man in the closet, a man who had recently taken an order of protection out against her.
Questioned by Putnam, Kelly essentially repeated what she had already told police. She had received a mysterious phone call from Jim.
He said that he felt like somebody was threatening him.
And finding the house empty, she had taken the kids for their own safety.
I just put him in my car and left.
I said, why didn't you call the police? And she said, well, he had threatened me with an order of protection.
And telling me he was going to send me to jail and all this kind of stuff. And I was scared, but I was more scared for my children, to tell you the truth.
He is the one that's trying to divorce her and take her kids. So I suppose she didn't care where he was or what he was doing. She cared about 3 children she gave birth to.
Although, as Kelly explained to the detective, she was the one who had first contemplated divorce.
I caught him cheating, and that's when all of this started.
Who did he cheat with?
A woman that he went to boarding school with.
But when Jim found out she'd been to see a lawyer, Kelly said he'd quickly started his own divorce proceeding.
He jumped on me.
Beat you to the punch.
And then he took the kids. He picked the kids up from school, so he would have physical custody of the children.
Clearly, Kelly thought Jim had done her wrong. But didn't that also give her a motive for murder?
Mothers are going to do whatever they need to be with their kids.
And just how far would Kelly go? The police were starting to wonder. During the interrogation, Putnam did a little snooping around in Kelly's apartment.
We had her sign a waiver for us to, search the apartment.
In the living room, Putnam discovered a small paper bag.
Then I looked in the paper bag and there was a box of latex gloves.
Of course, the detective had already been to the scene and knew that gloves were left at the scene. So he was very suspicious of that.
The police seized the box of gloves and sent them to the crime lab to be tested alongside the glove tip. And while they awaited the test results, Detective Putnam tried to discover who, besides his estranged wife, might have a motive to kill Jim Cannon.
I talked to his business partner and couldn't find that he really had any problems with anybody. We go to where the evidence takes us. There was nobody else. No one could be developed as a suspect.
Coming up, the divorce file sheds new light on the Cannon marriage.
He alleged that she was hearing voices.
And the DNA testing raises troubling questions.
The contributor was a female, unknown female.
Tuesday, June 24th, 2008. It had been 4 months since Jim Cannon had filed for divorce from his wife, Kelly. And less than 24 hours earlier, on the morning of June 23rd, Jim had been found dead in his West Nashville home. But police already had a solid suspect.
All the evidence pointed to Kelly Cannon. She was not a suspect at the beginning. She was a person of interest. We go to where the evidence takes us and everything pointed to her.
Kelly had admitted she'd been to the house the night of the murder.
That's the million-dollar question, because did she go there with the intent of committing a crime, or was she just a concerned mother out at 1:30 in the morning, just stopping by the house to check on the kids?
Questioning Kelly after Jim's body had been found, police discovered a box of latex gloves in her apartment.
We knew that the killer wore gloves, so of course that was sort of a little red flag.
But the gloves weren't all the police based their suspicions on. By that Tuesday, Detective Putnam was also privy to the full details of the Cannons' divorce.
He somehow found out I'd represented Mr. Cannon in the divorce, and he wanted to know if I had copies of the custody orders of who had custody of the house and who had custody of the children. I said, yes, I do have copies of those orders.
The papers that attorney John Hollins gave the detectives didn't just detail custody matters. The divorce filings painted a picture of a woman struggling with far more than postpartum depression and an addiction to pain pills.
After the birth of her first child, Kelly was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
According to the divorce filing, Kelly had kept her illness under control with medication. But after the birth of her third child, things had changed for the worse.
Those hormone changes after 3 kids, doing it 3 times, not good.
According to the divorce filings, Kelly, wouldn't take her antipsychotic medications.
Miss Cannon claims she was hearing voices over the telephone and other voices, and that was basically as I call the last straw, the last event that happened that I think caused Jim to come see us to file for divorce.
Despite Kelly's mental illness, Jim's attorney said he had only reluctantly filed for divorce, primarily for the children's sake.
He had to hire nannies just to make sure his children were protected because he couldn't be there all the time.
According to his attorney, Jim had also hoped the divorce would spur Kelly to get back on her medication and to seek help for her addiction to painkillers.
Jim was, number one, madly in love with Kelly through the whole thing.
He wanted her to get better. He wanted, her to be his wife and the mother for the children. Jim wasn't pressing for the divorce.
But after the divorce filing, Kelly only seemed to get worse instead of better. Only a few days after the papers were filed, she had been rushed to the emergency room after collapsing in the lobby of a West Nashville hotel.
Her weight got, to 90 pounds at one point, just, I believe, what I was told, due to the alcohol and drug abuse, that she just wasn't eating.
Days later, she had checked into Cumberland Heights, a Nashville rehab center.
She stayed there for 30 days, and they had recommended that she go for longer treatment, a longer period of treatment out of state or at some other long-term treatment facility.
According to Jim's attorney, after she had finished rehab at Cumberland Heights in April, Kelly had not followed the recommendation for outpatient treatment.
At first, she agreed to do that, and then she declined to do it.
I don't think that Kelly ever got a solid footing in her sobriety.
But then, barely a month after Kelly was released from rehab, came the incident in May. Kelly had showed up at the house and tried to take the children while Jim dialed 911.
She got the baby. Now she's leaving. She's trying to leave.
Has she been drinking, sir?
I have no idea, but she takes drugs. She's a narcotic addict.
She snatched the youngest child, who was, I think, 18 months at the time, put her in her car, and she took off.
She drove through the yard, ran over all the kids' toys and bikes, had the baby with her in the car, went 70 miles an hour through subdivisions and very congested mall traffic area.
And as he stood in the yard watching his wife speed away, Jim Cannon made a decision.
It was kind of spiraling out of control, and he felt like he really didn't have any option but to go ahead and proceed with the divorce.
He really wanted to move on for his children's sake and create a life for them that was normal and wasn't filled with craziness.
Jim Cannon never got the chance to create a new life for his children. On the evening of June 22, 2008, someone had snuck into the bedroom where he slept and strangled him.
Once you apply that ligature around the neck to cut off the airway, it just takes a matter of seconds.
And as far as whose hands had tightened the cord, Kelly certainly had a motive. But was she physically capable of committing the crime?
The killer would have to strangle a man to death, get him in the closet, get the chest of drawers in front of the closet, and get out with no one hearing anything. No struggle, nothing. So that would have been challenging for whomever, especially a 5'2", 90-pound woman.
The police hoped the DNA analysis of the glove fragment found at the scene would settle the question. But they weren't just going to sit back and wait on the results. On Wednesday, the detectives started canvassing West Nashville Walgreens stores, hoping to learn just when Kelly acquired the gloves found in her apartment.
The very day they found the body, they went to Kelly Cannon's apartment and were talking to her, and they happened to notice a box of Walgreens brand latex gloves in the apartment.
Reviewing surveillance video taken at a West Nashville Walgreens on the night of Jim's murder revealed how Kelly got the gloves.
Kelly Cannon had actually gone into the Walgreens and picked up a box of latex gloves and exited the business without paying for them.
The video shows her putting them under her arm. You know, she pretends to be interested in other things, actually talks to the pharmacist, and then leaves the store without paying for them.
The same evening they reviewed the Walgreens surveillance video, Metro Nashville police pulled Kelly Cannon over.
When we found her, she was out doing a shopping spree. She had filled her car and made statements that Jim wanted her to have these things, which I thought was kind of strange.
The police had a couple of things for Kelly, too. A pair of warrants. The first forced her to submit to oral swabs for DNA analysis.
She wasn't a happy camper. You know, why couldn't I just call her attorney and make arrangements where they could have just came down like the next day, you know, things of that nature.
Detective Putnam informed Kelly that she would be more than welcome to contact her attorney herself from jail. The second warrant was an arrest warrant, although it wasn't for murder charges.
While the case was under investigation, Detective Putnam actually arrested her for violating the order of protection.
Kelly posted bond the next day, but it wasn't long before she added another picture to her growing portfolio of mugshots. On the morning of July 9th, Detective Putnam took Kelly Cannon into custody for the murder of her husband. Although, much like her previous arrest, she acted as if the whole thing was an annoying inconvenience.
She was in bed, talking on the phone. We kept waiting until, you know, we need to go.
Why had the authorities finally decided to act? The DNA results had come in the day before.
The tip of a latex glove that was found in the bedroom had Jim's blood on the outside, his DNA. It had Kelly Cannon's DNA on the inside.
But were the results as ironclad as the police and prosecutors had hoped? The crime lab had also tested the blood stain found outside the bedroom where Jim was murdered.
It came back that the contributor was a female, a known female.
It was not Kelly's blood, it was not Jim's blood, nor anybody else that they tested.
Coming up, will the DNA evidence cinch a conviction?
The evidence found on the glove tip was especially strong.
Or will it raise reasonable doubts?
Bloodstain 678. You have that in front of you?
Yes.
When Kelly Cannon walked into a Davidson County courtroom on April 26, 2010, she still looked every bit the glamorous West Nashville socialite. But in truth, the mother of three was in desperate straits. She was about to stand trial for a crime that had stunned the city, the murder of her estranged husband, Jim.
It happened in an affluent area of Nashville. A very nice house, a lawyer, his wife who had everything going for them. So that was extremely unusual.
The setting may have been unusual, but the alleged motive wasn't. The prosecution opened their case by outlining the Cannons' contentious divorce and custody battle.
Jim Cannon had made the decision to divorce Kelly and seek full custody of the children, and she decided to take steps, at least in her mind, to stop Mr. Cannon from getting full custody of the children.
In its open, the defense countered by claiming that Kelly was incapable of committing the crime.
The defense strenuously argued that there is simply no way that this petite woman could have killed her husband.
Kelly Cannon was a very small woman, not in the greatest of health at that time. And the defense's argument was that she couldn't have physically been able to strangle James Cannon.
Undeterred, when the prosecutors started presenting their case, they called Jim's attorney to the stand and picked right up where they had left off.
I went through and gave the jury the chronology of the events of the divorce, from the date that it was filed, what were the allegations in it, and the various court orders.
Mr. Cannon was alleging that she was practically crazy. She was crazy. She was nuts. She was on drugs. And I don't know how much of that was for the benefit of the divorce court judge, but those were his allegations.
Whatever the truth of Jim's allegations, the prosecutors claimed that Kelly was clearly angry about the divorce.
She was very upset about the fact that he already had custody of the children.
To prove just how upset, prosecutors called a pair of witnesses. The first was the woman who'd been out with Kelly on the night of Jim's murder. In her testimony, she confirmed that Kelly had spoken to Jim on the phone that night. Although contrary to Kelly's story about a fearful, threatened Jim, her friend had heard a very different conversation.
It sounded like a marital fight where she was, or they were talking about that he was getting custody of the kids, and she, indicated that she felt that they were her kids and that he couldn't have them.
How far would Kelly go to keep Jim from getting custody? For an answer, the prosecutors turned to a bartender at a suburban Nashville restaurant. He had seen Kelly's arrest on the news.
He realized on seeing that photograph that that woman, Mrs. Cannon, had been in his bar some weeks earlier. She had been drunk and she had been running her mouth. And she was saying that if her husband divorced her and tried to take the children away from her, that she would kill him.
We obtained his records that particular day and did find transactions she had made that day that he was her server and had waited on her there in the bar.
And when he took the stand on the afternoon of April 26th, the bartender recounted the conversation for the jury.
Did she make this statement about killing her husband more than once throughout the course of the time you were listening to her?
Yes, ma'am. She said it in a couple different contexts, that she was so mad that she could kill him, then if he took the babies, tried to take the babies from her, that she would kill him.
Had Kelly made good on her threat? On April 27th, a DNA analyst from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation took the stand. Her testimony focused on the primary piece of evidence in the prosecution's case, a tiny piece of latex, part of a glove Jim's killer had apparently left behind.
I did recover DNA, and it was a match to Kelly Cannon.
There's no question the strongest evidence was the DNA evidence. The evidence found on the glove tip was especially strong.
But did the DNA findings also offer hope for the defense? On cross-examination, the defense pointed out that Kelly wasn't the only woman who had left her DNA at the crime scene.
Bloodstain 678. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And that was determined by you to be an unknown female?
Yes.
The nannies, the housekeeper, we were able to eliminate them.
There was blood in that home that did not belong to Kelly, did not belong to her kids, and that did not belong to Mr. Cannon. That's reasonable doubt.
To raise further doubt, the defense focused on whether Kelly was even physically capable of committing the crime. When they started presenting their case on April 28th, they called a forensic expert to walk jurors through just what it would take to strangle Jim.
This is an act that requires interpersonal contact directly. It requires the assailant to place the ligature around that person's neck and to pull it tight enough and hold it tightly long enough for that person to suffer the damage that leads to death.
We're not talking about a shotgun or gunshot or a stabbing or anything like that. They were alleging that this tiny lady who weighed, I guess, approximately 95 pounds soaking wet, had taken a bone cord and strangled her husband.
And Kelly's presence in the courtroom only underscored the defense's point.
She definitely does come across as very small, very tiny. She also came across as very emotional. She was in tears for a large part of the trial.
But was she too emotional to testify in her own defense?
You always hope that the defendant does testify. Not only does it make it a more interesting case, but you're curious, her explanation of what happened.
We were all looking forward to hearing what she had to say, but she pled the fifth.
So have you discussed with Mr. Strauss the advantages and the disadvantages of testifying? Okay. And then after your discussion with him, did you make a decision about whether or not you wanted to testify? Okay. And that decision was that you do not want to testify, is that correct? Correct.
But when the defense presented its closing arguments that afternoon, they did offer one last twist. According to the defense, if everything Jim had alleged in the divorce was true, that made Kelly even less capable of committing his murder.
At that relevant time, she's anorexic, she's asthmatic, she's subsisting on wine, enough prescription medications to choke a racehorse, and her ever-present inhaler. But the state's theory is that she morphs into a perfect killing machine.
In its close, the prosecution countered that rather than a killing machine, Jim's murder was merely the work of a desperate woman.
It doesn't require a 300-pound person. It just requires a person with determination. The determination that Jim Cannon wasn't going to take my babies. He was not going to take my children.
Coming up, the jury has a surprise in store.
I was absolutely shocked that the jury came back that quickly.
April 29, 2010. It was barely an hour and a half after closing arguments in the trial of Kelly Cannon, who stood accused of murdering her estranged husband, Jim. But the mother of three was already back in the courtroom. The jury had just announced that it had reached a verdict.
We didn't really have time to get much more than get back to the office and put our things down and make a cup of coffee. And then we were called back to the court.
I was absolutely shocked that the jury came back that quickly.
And when the jury filed in moments later, the prospects looked grim for Kelly.
I just couldn't believe that within an hour, hour and a half, that they would have acquitted her.
I also understand that you do have a verdict in this case.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, I'm going to ask you, first of all, what your verdict is with regard to the charge of murder in the first degree.
Guilty.
The verdict was guilty on the indicted offense of first-degree premeditated murder. And in Tennessee, the statutory sentence for first-degree premeditated murder is life in prison.
And that was, all I could ask for is that justice was served.
I believe that she did it. I truly believe that she took his life.
Compared to her often emotional behavior at trial, Kelly remained silent through the verdict.
She spent much of the trial in tears, but then the verdict comes in, and there really wasn't much reaction at all. I don't know if that's because she expected it, or if maybe she had, been through so much that she couldn't cry anymore.
But whatever Kelly had been through, it was nothing compared to what her family had suffered.
Kelly Cannon had taken her husband and her children on a roller coaster ride.
She was a sexy young woman with a weakness for men in uniform.
She flirted with the guys. She gets you going.
She was one of those individuals that seems to like police officers.
She even married one.
He rolled in that one evening and he said, "We're gonna get married." I said, "You lost your damn mind."
And 2 years later, she met another.
She told all of us that she was divorced.
It wasn't entirely true. Was it just a little white lie?
Oh, come on, nobody's that stupid.
Or did it mask a deadly secret?
His death was either a suicide or a homicide.
At around 10 a.m. on the morning of January 22, 2001, a couple of Forsyth County, Georgia firefighters arrived at the apartment of Randy Thompson. It wasn't exactly an emergency call.
Several of his friends called and he didn't answer the phone, and they went over there to see why Randy wasn't answering his cell phone or his home phone.
A fellow firefighter and former sheriff's deputy, Randy had spent the past few days battling what he thought was either food poisoning or a serious stomach virus.
He was vomiting a lot, actually dry heaving because I'm sure there was nothing there, but very, very sick.
He'd even been to the emergency room a few days earlier.
All the signs pointed to a stomach virus or to food poisoning.
Back home, Randy had spent much of the weekend in bed, tended by his girlfriend, Lynn Turner.
Sunday afternoon, Lynn said she went by and carried him some food, some chicken soup.
And the following morning, his friends from the fire department had come by to check on him.
He actually had a doctor's appointment that a friend of his was going to take him to.
But there was no answer at the door.
Nobody can get in, he's not answering the phone.
Randy was home, however. Looking in the window, the firefighters could see their friend sprawled out on the sofa. But he didn't appear to be napping.
Randy didn't respond at all to knocks, yells.
My husband was a volunteer firefighter, so I turned on his pager and I could hear the two-way talk on the radio. So I knew that they were there. I knew something at that point was really wrong.
Worried for his friend, one of the firefighters quickly kicked in the door. But it was too late.
Randy was already dead.
Randy's family and friends were devastated.
He and I were very, very close. He was my firstborn and my only son.
Lynn, however, appeared to be stoic about Randy's death.
She did not act like she was grieving, but Lynn was a very strong person. She stuffed a lot of things. So, that was how I took it. She was just stuffing that morning.
Was the tragedy truly a surprise?
Randy had attempted suicide. He had done it before.
Or was it a deadly case of deja vu? A curvy brunette in a brand new Camaro. People were quick to notice when 27-year-old Lynn Turner returned home to Cumming, Georgia in 1994.
Lynn was very flashy. She always had a flashy car. She always had plenty of money.
She always had plenty of men clamoring for her attention, too.
She flirted with the guys. She gets you going.
Although in 1994, Lynn had her sights set on one guy in particular, Randy Thompson.
Randy and Lynn met each other here in the county through a mutual acquaintance, someone that Lynn had gone to high school with and someone who actually worked with Randy and was friends with Randy.
I couldn't understand why she was chasing Randy like she was. I mean, at first, he just was not interested. She was very, very persistent.
Part of the attraction may have had something to do with Randy's career.
Randy initially worked in the sheriff's department. He left there and became a fireman.
She was one of those individuals that seems to like police officers and law enforcement, and she hung around with them a lot.
Since leaving home at 21, Lynn had not only worked as a 911 dispatcher in neighboring Cobb County, she had even married a member of the force.
It was typical of a lot of marriages. Basically, the marriage just grew apart. They went their separate directions.
She told all of us, including Randy, that she was divorced.
When she first met Randy, Lynn was still living in Cobb County. But once they started dating, she was in Cumming at every opportunity.
She started coming down here during the week, every weekend, spending an awful lot of time down here.
She also did her best to win over Randy's family. Christmas 1994, she showered the family with gifts.
She bought my husband and I a real nice stereo and CD thing combined, bought our two daughters nice gifts from Victoria's Secret. And we had just met the girl, and here she was buying all this extravagant stuff.
3 months later, Lynn was back home for good.
She and Randy moved into an apartment here in Cumming.
It was only temporary. That summer, Lynn discovered she was pregnant. She began preparing for the new addition by buying a house.
It was a ranch. It was all one level, a big open area, which was like dining room, living room, kitchen.
And the house was only one of Lynn's many purchases.
She furnished the house, and she had helped Randy buy a new car, and she was just having everything new all the time. And I finally asked her, how can you afford this? And she said that it was her inheritance from her grandmother.
Lynn gave birth to a baby girl in January of 1996.
She was a very loving mother. She was a very good mother.
But just as Lynn appeared to be settling down, her relationship with Randy became increasingly unstable.
Their relationship would be good, but as time passed and as they stayed together, it was volatile.
Tumultuous would be a good way to describe it.
And after the baby was born, their problems seemed to intensify.
They couldn't get along. They just couldn't get along. I mean, they were always jealous of each other. She was very possessive of Randy.
Randy moved out several times.
And the drama didn't stop there.
There had been a couple of half-hearted suicide attempts that Randy had made.
The first time, it was Lynn who dialed 911 and reported that Randy had tried to overdose on painkillers.
Paramedics responded and decided that Randy posed no threat to himself or anybody else and just left him at home.
2 years later, Randy had picked up the phone himself and summoned a friend who took him to the ER.
It was really just an attempt for attention.
Whatever Randy's motivation, the suicide attempts led to a reconciliation with Lynn.
They always did a lot better when he needed her, when he was sick or when he needed something. I think she got self-worth from people needing her.
In 1998, the couple had a second child. But by April of 1999, Randy had moved out again. And this time, he said it was for good.
Randy finally decided that he couldn't take it anymore.
They had just had it. They were like oil and water.
Randy wasn't entirely out of Lynn's life, however. The couple did have 2 children together.
Once they split up and Randy moved out, they still stayed in contact with each other. There was definitely a connection there.
But there was plenty of animosity, too.
Randy would call to make arrangements to see the children, and if Randy did the least little thing to make her mad, she wouldn't let him see them.
In October of 2000, minor sinus surgery produced some major side effects on Randy's health.
He had had a lot of problems. He had a staph infection. He had had a stent put in, close to his heart to give him intravenous antibiotics.
By the following January, Randy appeared on the road to a full recovery.
He was supposed to have that stent out because he was better.
There were signs his relationship with Lynn might improve, too. In the middle of the month, Lynn called and suggested the family get together for dinner at a local steakhouse.
Friday night, Randy had had dinner with Lynn and their children.
Randy was still hoping, because of the children, he wanted to work things out with her and make the children a home.
Afterwards, they went back to Lynn's for dessert. But Randy didn't stay the night.
I had called him that night to see how things had gone, and he said, not well.
And unfortunately for Randy Thompson, things wouldn't get any better. January 21st, 2001. It was a little before lunchtime when Randy received a call from his friend Melanie Harper.
I called him to ask him if he wanted to go to eat with us. He had been sick all day, he'd been vomiting, asked me if we would come over.
Concerned about their friend, Melanie and her husband rushed right over.
When I got there, he was just kind of in another world. He couldn't focus, just kind of in and out, kind of with us and then not with us.
Was it yet another suicide attempt?
He over-medicated himself a great deal. As a matter of fact, they gathered up all the pills in the house and flushed them because they were afraid that he had overdosed and that he would lose his job.
Randy's friends rushed him to the emergency room.
They pretty much told me that he had a stomach virus.
They gave him some fluids and some other treatment, and he got to feeling better, and they sent him home.
Lynn dropped by several times to help care for Randy as he recovered from his sudden ailment.
She had come over on a couple of occasions.
She went over to his apartment and took him some tea, and also she had taken him something to eat.
On Monday morning, January 22nd, some of Randy's friends dropped back by the apartment to check on him. But Randy didn't answer the first knock or the second.
They're at his apartment. Nobody can get in. He's not answering the phone.
Randy wouldn't come to the door, but his truck was there. And they got permission to break the door and go in.
And when his friends kicked in the door, they found Randy dead on the sofa.
He was lying on his back, stretched out. It appeared that if you just glanced at him that he might be asleep.
Coming up, did Randy die from natural causes?
He had been feeling so sick.
Or had he finally followed through and left Lynn forever?
She said Randy had committed suicide.
On January 22, 2001, friends found Lynn Turner's boyfriend, Randy Thompson, lying dead on his sofa. He was only 32 years old.
He was young, and he had just been to see his physician on Friday.
He had been feeling so sick for several days. He's throwing up, he's violently ill, and they take him to the hospital.
During the visit, the doctors had diagnosed a stomach virus or possibly food poisoning. Neither was typically fatal. Could there have been complications? Randy had recently suffered from a fairly serious staph infection.
There was some thought that perhaps his death was related to that infection.
Maybe the antibiotic was too strong for his system, because I think they have to treat that pretty aggressive.
But during Randy's autopsy, the state medical examiner made a startling discovery. It looked as if a foreign substance had overwhelmed Randy's system, but it wasn't an antibiotic.
I looked at all the slides on Randy Thompson, and I saw that there were crystals in his kidneys that looked like ethylene glycol crystals.
Ethylene glycol is a chemical that cannot be produced naturally in the body. The only way that ethylene glycol could end up in a person's body would be for it to be ingested.
Primarily found in antifreeze, ethylene glycol is readily available, and in the right doses, it can be deadly.
The textbook answer for how much ethylene glycol it takes to result in someone's death is that as little as 100 cc's. So we're talking about a third of a soda can.
But why would someone drink antifreeze?
The vast majority of ethylene glycol deaths that we see in our office are suicides.
Randy did have a history of suicide attempts. Had he finally succeeded? Or was there another explanation? What if Randy didn't know he was drinking antifreeze?
Ethylene glycol is odorless and tasteless, except for a slightly sweet taste. So if I take regular antifreeze, and especially some that may be clear, and put it in any food, you're not going to know it's there.
His death was either going to be a suicide or a homicide.
That was assuming the crystals Dr. Kaponen saw were ethylene glycol. To be sure, he sent tissue samples from Randy's kidneys and urine to the state crime lab for further analysis.
We could not definitively say it was there because the response that was produced on analysis was not large enough.
In the light of a negative ethylene glycol test, I had to come up with another reason why he had these crystals in his kidneys.
As a result, the official cause of death ruled out both suicide and homicide.
I went with the anatomic diagnosis that I had, which was that he had a slightly enlarged heart.
A state crime lab did not think that there was any issue as to the death. Basically, it chalked it up to cardiac dysrhythmia.
But was the case closed? Not as far as Randy's mom was concerned.
I knew something was wrong. I didn't think it was a natural death.
At first, Nita's conviction that her son had died due to foul play was merely a hunch. But then she received a note that changed everything. The note came from a woman named Catherine Turner. Her son was Glenn Turner, the man Lynn said she had divorced.
There was a bereavement card from Kathy, and I read it, and she had her phone number, and she had some of the things that had happened to Glenn in there.
I just was telling her who I was and why I was writing about my son.
One of the first things she told Nita was that her son Glenn wasn't Lynn's ex-husband. He was her late husband.
I found out at that time that Lynn and Glenn were still married when she was seeing Randy.
Lynn and Glenn had met in 1992. At the time, Lynn was a Cobb County 911 dispatcher and Glenn was a county police officer.
It started out as, let's just put it this way, to be pleasant, a one-night stand.
That may have been how it started, but Glenn soon fell for Lynn. He proposed a year later.
He rolled in that one evening and he said, "We're gonna get married." I said, "You lost your damn mind."
The couple married on August 21st, 1993. Unfortunately, as with Randy years later, constant bickering marred the relationship. The arguments were mostly about money.
Lynn unfortunately had what my parents used to refer to as champagne taste on a beer budget.
Glenn worked more than one job. Lynn worked more than one job.
Lynn was also gone a lot, and she began making frequent trips back to her hometown 30 miles away in Cumming, Georgia.
She would go down on the weekend telling Glenn that she was working undercover for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations.
But back in Cobb County, rumors started circulating that Lynn's work in Cumming was more under the covers than undercover.
I had heard suspicions that she was having an affair, but I didn't have any hard facts, just suspicion.
He had to know deep down in she was doing something, because you got your new bride and you stopped having sex after about probably 60 days, 90 days into the marriage. She said she had a female problem. Oh, come on, nobody's that stupid.
But when Glenn suddenly fell ill on March 2nd, 1995, Lynn was there to take him to the emergency room.
The doctor said, I think you got a virus, something like that. 24, 48 hours, you'll be all right. Send him home.
The next morning, it appeared that Glenn was feeling better. Lynn made him a light lunch before going out to run errands.
He got up and drank some stuff, ate some stuff, some Jell-O.
When Lynn returned, she had found Glenn sprawled out on the bed, not breathing. Minutes later, Glenn's colleagues received an alert no cop wants to hear.
My pager went off, and it had 63 on there, and 63 meant signal 63, officer down.
Glenn Turner was dead, and according to the autopsy, it was due to natural causes.
The medical examiner told me that he'd had an enlarged heart. That'll happen to him because they're physical and they do a lot of workouts and stuff, and then all of a sudden they quit.
It was the same diagnosis Randy's mother received, and much like Nita Thompson, Catherine Turner had a hard time believing her son had died from natural causes.
He was a strapping, healthy young man, 31 years of age. To die that quickly and under flu-like symptoms and not ever being sick until he got sick this time, something was wrong.
But even as Catherine Turner struggled to deal with her son's death, her daughter-in-law Lynn was moving on.
Days after Glenn Turner's death, she moved in with Randy Thompson.
6 years later, Randy would be dead, and Catherine Turner would be on the phone with his mother.
Kathy and I started comparing notes about Glenn's death and Randy's death, and everything was so much the same. The illness, the way they were sick.
It was amazing. She wouldn't hardly give me any chance to talk. I mean, she was telling me all the things that she was telling me was just exactly what I had gone through.
The next day, Randy's mother contacted Dr. Kaponen at the state medical examiner's office.
That's when I first learned about Lynn Turner and the death of her first husband.
The medical examiner found out that Lynn had been married and that her husband had passed away rather unexpectedly.
Was it merely a coincidence?
I had a very strange feeling when they left my office because all this other information was very concerning to me. And so at that point, I went and talked to the toxicologist and see what they could do about re-examining their data.
And when the toxicologist recrunched his numbers from Randy's toxicology analysis, he realized he'd made a critical mistake.
In fact, what I thought was an insignificant quantity of ethylene glycol was actually 10 times larger.
The medical examiner ruled Randy Thompson's death to be a homicide by ethylene glycol.
Forsyth County authorities immediately opened a murder investigation, and Lynn Turner was at the top of their suspect list.
She was the person who had been with him shortly before he became ill, so she had the opportunity.
And if Randy had been murdered, what about Glenn Turner?
I got a copy of Glenn's autopsy report, and I reviewed the microscope slides. And it's when I reviewed those slides that I saw the oxalate crystals.
When he saw the slides of the kidney, found out the calcium oxalate crystals, notified the medical examiner here, and then the body was exhumed.
While forensic specialists collected samples from Glenn's body, Cobb County reopened the investigation into his death. And it wasn't long before Lynn was at the top of their suspect list, too.
Lynn was the common denominator between Randy and Glenn.
There was also the affair with Randy Thompson that started well before Glenn's death. But would it be enough to convince a jury to convict her of murder?
There was nothing at the scene to indicate foul play, and the medical examiner couldn't or didn't find anything in the autopsy There was really no investigation into his death as being a homicide until after Randy Thompson's death.
Flipping through photos taken at the time of Glenn's death, investigators stumbled across an intriguing possibility. Did a snapshot from the Turners' garage contain a potentially crucial clue overlooked 6 years earlier?
Can of antifreeze shows up, but I didn't think nothing about it. I mean, it was a garage, and you know, you're gonna have things like that in your garage.
Unfortunately for Lynn, her garage wasn't the only place investigators found antifreeze.
The medical examiner here, after he has exhumed the body, found the ethylene glycol, issued another death certificate which shows that the death is homicide.
I slammed my hand down on the desk, and I knew it.
By the end of October, as Forsyth County authorities continued to build their case against Lynn and Randy's death, Cobb County investigators were ready to act. On November 1st, 2002, the Cobb County District Attorney's Office charged Lynn Turner with the first-degree murder of her husband, Glenn.
Lynn was indicted on 1 count of murder, and she ultimately turned herself in to the Cobb County Sheriff's Office.
Coming up, prosecutors struggled to put the poison in Lynn's hands.
This was a circumstantial case entirely.
And Lynn prepares to face a jury of her peers.
Lynn, people are calling you a murderer, is that true?
April 26, 2004. 3 years after Randy Thompson had been found dead on his sofa, his girlfriend Lynn Turner went on trial for murder. But while she was a suspect in Randy's death, it wasn't his murder she was on trial for. Instead, she was charged with the 1995 death of her husband, Glenn Turner.
Both men had died the same way, by ethylene glycol poisoning.
Cause of death wasn't the only thing the two men had in common, however.
The primary connection between those two is Lynn. I think that was the biggest problem that we had to overcome in the case.
And under Georgia law, Randy's death would be a crucial factor in the current trial.
The law here in Georgia allows you to put in evidence of what we call similar transaction.
We have the ability to introduce evidence that somebody else has been involved in the same activity for which she's on trial for.
And in Lynn's case, the judge agreed to allow Randy Thompson's death to be introduced as evidence, even though she had yet to be formally charged in his murder.
We felt, obviously, that should not be done, but the court allowed that in.
And when the prosecution delivered its open that morning, the DA was quick to capitalize on the opportunity.
The evidence will show that there is one link, there is one thread, there is one common denominator, and it's this woman, Julia Lynn Womack Turner.
According to the prosecutors, Lynn had murdered her husband partly to facilitate her affair with Randy. But it wasn't her only motive. There was also money. The fortune Lynn had spent buying and furnishing her new home incoming.
From my understanding, the reason she had money was because her grandmother had died previously and she had inherited a good amount of money from that.
That's what Lynn had told Randy and his family, at least. But it wasn't entirely true, prosecutors claimed. Lynn had inherited some money from her grandmother, but the big windfall had been Glenn's death.
Lynn actually benefited in a couple of ways when Glenn died. There was the death benefits that the county has, which was several $1,000s.
There was also a $100,000 life insurance policy that listed Lynn as the beneficiary.
She had Glenn change the beneficiary on his policy, life insurance policy, before they actually got married, while they were still engaged.
In addition to Glenn's death benefits and insurance, Lynn also cashed in on her late husband's pension.
Because they had been married long enough, she would draw his pension. So she was drawing $600 and something a month from his pension in addition to the life insurance benefits.
Her motivation was money all the way around. I don't think you can get anybody that'll say anything differently.
The state then told the jury that Lynn had killed her husband by spiking Jell-O, soup, and sweet tea with ethylene glycol-rich antifreeze.
Ethylene glycol is reported as having a sweet taste to it. And so ethylene glycol can be hidden in a number of foods or drinks that have a sweet taste.
Next, toxicologists testified that evidence of ethylene glycol poisoning was found in both Glenn's and Randy's kidneys.
Byproducts of ethylene glycol are oxalate crystals, and these oxalate crystals deposit in the tubules in your kidneys and result in renal failure, which is not a pleasant way to die.
The state then called a witness from a local animal shelter who testified that Lynn had inquired about the effects of ingesting antifreeze.
Lynn had called up there asking about poisons and stuff, about as far as what it would take to kill a human being compared to a dog, how much it would take.
But were all her questions hypothetical?
She also inquired how the veterinarians there would put animals down, and they told her that they didn't know the name of it, but what the vets used was purple stuff.
She had asked me, could anybody get it? Was it easy to get a hold of? And I told her no, it was a controlled substance.
It was a revelation that caught many in the courtroom off guard.
I mean, when I heard that, I thought, I mean, there's any doubt now, I mean, that's pretty much the nail in the coffin. I mean, I thought that was critical.
One person in the courtroom who wasn't noticeably moved by the state's case, though, was Lynn herself.
You mean you would be hard to notice that she was the one that was on trial for murder? Giggling, laughing, cutting up, walking around the court area. I mean, just, she didn't look real stressed out or concerned. Just very cool, calm, and in control.
Why was Lynn so unconcerned about the charges against her? According to her attorney, part of it was simply her personality.
She doesn't show emotion very well. That's the way she is. She internalizes everything.
But as her defense team pointed out in their opening arguments, Lynn also had reason to be confident. The prosecution's case had one large problem. There was no physical evidence that could prove Lynn had introduced the antifreeze into Glenn's system.
Who introduced it, if it was introduced? The state cannot show that in this case.
I think most prosecutors would like to have as much tangible evidence as you can have. In this particular case, we didn't really have that much.
In fact, Lynn's counsel argued that the presence of oxalate crystals in Glenn's kidneys didn't necessarily mean he was poisoned at all.
Some crystals are formed naturally. There is ethylene glycol in some embalming fluid. The funeral home, when we were dealing with the investigation of the case, could not find the records of what embalming fluid was used.
He also attacked the methodology that was used in testing the bodily organs to determine whether or not there was any ethylene glycol present in Glenn Turner's internal organs.
But in their closing arguments to the jury, the prosecution countered the defense's claim by reminding jurors that Randy's kidneys had also contained evidence of ethylene glycol.
It would be highly unlikely that two people would die of exactly the same poisoning and have a relationship with one woman.
But highly unlikely didn't necessarily mean beyond a reasonable doubt. Would the jury believe the state's circumstantial case was enough to convict?
This was a circumstantial case entirely, and that is sometimes a little more difficult to convince a jury just based on these circumstances.
When the case went to the jury, Glenn's mother was confident her son would finally get some justice.
There was nothing I was concerned about as far as the trial went. I felt like everybody did a fantastic job.
Lynn appeared just as confident of an acquittal.
And some of the news reporters, they were out to dinner, and Lynn walked up to the table to him in the restaurant. They were drinking a beer. She said, "Oh, I'll have one of those tomorrow night." And they said, "Oh, you will?" She said, "Oh, yeah. All this junk will be over with. I'll have one of those tomorrow night."
Coming up, tension mounts as the jury returns its verdict.
You've got 12 people who have got to view all of the evidence the same way that you have viewed it.
On May 14, 2004, Lynn Turner walked into the courthouse alongside her attorneys for the close of her murder trial. Charged with poisoning her husband with antifreeze, the 35-year-old faced life in prison if convicted. After receiving instructions from the judge, the jury broke for deliberations. While confident in their case, without a so-called smoking gun, the prosecution knew that anything could happen.
I was as concerned when it went to the jury about what they were going to do as I was when we started. You've got 12 people who have got to view all of the evidence the same way that you have viewed it.
5 hours later, the jury announced it had reached a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Julia Lynn Womack Turner, guilty of malice murder as alleged in count 1 of the indictment.
Indebtedness, the lifestyle, all of those things that when you put all the pieces together, they basically took the place of the smoking gun.
Lynn was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole in 14 years. If she was fazed by the verdict, she didn't show it.
Just calmly reached up with that old look she has with that, I'm better than you, and taking her earrings off like it was no big deal.
How could someone sit there and listen to these things and have no reaction, either anger or sadness?
Apparently because it hadn't yet dawned on Lynn just what life in prison meant.
When we learned from the deputy that was taking her across, she said, my attorneys will be over here in a minute. How long do you think it'll take them to set bail for me? She said, ma'am, do what? She said, how long do you think, I'm hungry. How long do you think it's going to take my attorneys to get over here and get my bail set? She said, ma'am, you just got convicted of malice murder. You're not going anywhere.
Actually, she would be going somewhere, to a Georgia prison to serve a life sentence for murder. But she was back in court in October of 2004. There, 5 months after being convicted of killing Glenn Turner, she was formally charged with the murder of Randy Thompson.
Charging you with murder, having committed the crime of murder. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty?
We plead not guilty, Your Honor.
Forsyth County authorities saw things differently, of course. According to the indictment, Lynn had followed up Glenn's murder by poisoning Randy almost 6 years later. And once again, the alleged motive was insurance money.
With Randy, she stood on one policy to get $200,000.
Lynn's motivation was money and greed. That's all she thought about, was money and what she could get with the money.
Lynn's second trial began on March 12, 2007, and this time the stakes were much higher.
The prosecution had filed its intention to seek the death penalty, so the jury is the one who determines punishment in that circumstance. They had the choice of life with a possibility of parole, life without parole, or death.
But while the stakes had certainly risen, the prosecution's open would have sounded awfully familiar to anyone who had followed Lynn's first trial. The state's evidence, witnesses, and case against Lynn remained largely the same.
Anytime that the prosecution has what's called a similar transaction, where you had this first case that was so much like our case, and then that there had been the conviction, that always helps.
When Lynn's attorney presented his open, he added a new wrinkle to the proceedings. In marked contrast to Glenn's trial, the defense didn't deny that Randy had died of ethylene glycol poisoning, but that didn't mean he had been murdered.
We felt that Randy may have ingested the ethylene glycol himself.
Her defense team wanted people to think that Randy had committed suicide.
As proof, they pointed to Randy's history of suicide attempts.
Randy had a problem with taking prescription pills. He over-medicated himself a great deal. One specifically where he had overdosed, had to go to the hospital.
And why would Randy commit suicide on this particular occasion? According to the defense, the Friday night fight with Lynn was only one factor.
His financial condition was very poor. He was behind in pretty much everything. They were getting ready to take his truck. Just a lot of things, I think, in Randy's life that weren't going well.
Would any of Randy's friends confirm the assertion? Although called by the prosecution, Melanie Harper came close when questioned by the defense. On the stand, she admitted that Randy's friends hadn't ruled out the possibility of a suicide attempt.
We believed that he was probably toxic. He had taken too much medication.
Would the suicide angle be enough to raise reasonable doubt and allow Lynn to escape a death sentence? In closing arguments, the prosecutors did their best to defuse it.
The only rumors that have been introduced in this case were those that the defense asked about in their questioning of the witnesses.
Instead, the prosecution asked that the jurors focus on the facts and the unlikely set of coincidences that connected Randy and Glenn.
There were so many similar circumstances that was amazingly alike. I mean, freakishly alike.
But according to the prosecutors, the ultimate thing Glenn and Randy had in common was the woman who killed them.
To her, they represented things like down payments on boats, cars, and finally just a way to keep her lights and cell phone on. They were worth so much more to her dead than they ever were alive.
When it was the defense's turn, Lynn's attorneys argued there was a good reason the prosecution's case dwelled on coincidence. It was all they had.
The evidence isn't there. They can't tell you when this happened, where it happened, how it happened, because there's no evidence. And they can surmise, they can predict, they can assume, but that ain't the law.
Coming up, is coincidence enough to condemn Lynn to death?
You can save a life, or you can take a life.
On March 24, 2007, Lynn Turner was seated at a defendant's table for the second time. The 38-year-old widow was awaiting the verdict in her second capital murder trial. She faced the possibility of death if convicted. In the crowded courtroom, the jury foreperson read the verdict aloud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty this the 24th day of March 2007.
Lynn, of course, did not react to the verdict. She has not reacted really to any of the verdicts, but that's her personality.
Besides, jurors weren't done with Lynn just yet. 3 days after the verdict, they reconvened to decide her ultimate fate.
You have here a unique ability. You can save a life, or you can take a life.
The jury had the choice of life with a possibility of parole, life without parole, or death. And in Forsyth County, she received a sentence of life without parole.
I was disappointed. These were cold-blooded killings that required thought, premeditation, some planning, and they were solely for money. I thought she deserved to die.
For Glenn and Randy's loved ones, though, the fact that Lynn will never be able to hurt another cop's family is justice enough.
I just wanted her to be put where she could not hurt anybody else and not put another family through what she had put the Turners and us through.
She's a very cruel woman, and she's getting her punishment. And I just leave her be.